Hey, before I share this topic on fellowship, the first thing I want to do is to thank all those who made this possible, this talk possible. The first person I want to thank is Brother Heng Xuan, who just came out. Right. He has been the one who is really the mastermind behind all these wonderful slides. Right? And thank you for his patience working with me to develop these slides. I must say he's a very talented young Buddhist, who is very creative. So as you watch the slide, you can imagine the talent in him. I also like to thank the brothers and sisters in the EXCO who give very valuable feedback in terms of what it means by fellowship to them, which I will share with you during this presentation. One particular person I want to thank is Sister Yin Yin. As you know, she is the vice principal of a secondary school, and in her profession, right, just like her profession, I got to get a star from her before I can present. So thank you, Sister Yin Yin. And I also consulted Bante Chandawimala. I don't know how many of you know Venerable. He teaches at the Pokasi, right, to get his feedback on the slide as well. So I picked this topic because I thought it's very appropriate at this time. And I think it means a lot to us because we are a fellowship. And I thought it's good to reflect what does fellowship really means. Right? So let me get used to some of this gadget here. Well, the first thing I did when preparing for this talk is I checked what is the formal definition of fellowship. Right? It's a group of people who has the same purpose, as well as they coexist together, who share a common interest. So that is the typical definition in Cambridge, right? So naturally, the next thing I did was trying to understand what does a Buddhist definition of a fellowship, right? So I looked at several material, and one of them which I thought struck me very much is the conversation between the Buddha and Venerable Ananda, right? And in one occasion, Venerable Ananda mentioned to the Buddha that this is half of my holy life. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, and admirable camaraderie. This is how Venerable Ananda feels what a fellowship means. However, the Buddha says, don't say that, Ananda, don't say that. Admirable friendship and admirable companionship and admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of a holy life. And that's why we need to really understand that, in fact, true friendship, it really makes our Dhamma practice fully blossom. It is really part of living the Dhamma. And I'll try to explain what it means. So let's look at friendship from a Buddhist perspective. First is a friendship of what I call a sense of separateness, meaning that in a relationship, in a friendship, there's you and I, mine and yours. There's a distinct difference between the two. That is the one kind of friendship. And in this friendship, it centers around me as a person, right? And this kind of friendship is hard to sustain because as long as there is the ego and there's a differentiation between what is yours and what is mine, right? It will eventually leads to dukkha, right? Even when the friendship can be very loving, right? But at some point, when there's separation, it leads to dukkha. Right. So that is one kind of friendship where there is a separation between the relationship of the two persons. That's type 1. The other type of friendship is a friendship of wholeness, where we do not differentiate between you and I. So the you and I becomes as one, right? Where the friendship is based on a completely openness between the two parties. Right, where you have deep trust between the two persons, where you build the friendship without any expectation. So a complete sense of wholeness, where the centricity is around openness, right? You're able to share without fear of what the person is going to do on the other side. That is the second type of friendship. So in Buddhism, we place a lot of emphasis on the second type of friendship, which we can develop through wisdom and through meditation. Because through our cultivation of meditation, we try to let go of the self, right? We try to let go of me as a person, right? We let go of the I concept, right? And through the compassion and wisdom, when we develop that friendship is much more wholesome, right? Now, that kind of friendship, which we call the spiritual friendship, has actually two types, right? The first is what I call the horizontal friendship. So what do I mean by a horizontal friendship? It is friendship between people who are roughly at the same level in following the path and the same disposition, right? So Buddha cited two examples. One kind of disposition, which is very common among us, is we go clubbing together, we go dancing together, we go drinking together. So that kind of horizontal friendship is called the inferior disposition, right? The other type, where the Buddha mentioned, is more the superior disposition, whereby, like now, we are a fellowship, right? We learn the Dhamma, we practice the Dhamma. In many of our Dhamma projects, we do with great intent to cultivate love and bring good result. So that is the second type of disposition. So in either case, it is a horizontal friendship because we all come together at the same level, right, with a common spiritual purpose. That is a horizontal friendship. With a common goal that in the process of it, we transform our attachment. Because through that horizontal friendship, with the intent of helping somebody, right, we learn to let go of ourselves, right? So the important part which I will keep emphasizing in the fellowship is that as much as we come together with a common intent of helping the less fortunate, right? We go to an aged home, right? Or we go to a prison service, we do Dharma work, right? We are very focused on the outcome. But what is more important is the journey. So in this horizontal friendship, the journey of how we practice the Dhamma, of how we help one another in that journey, that is where we develop the spiritual path. That is why the Buddha says, as friendship is whole, not half, right? Because when you try to work with one another, right, you learn a lot. Just as much as I learned in the past 2 months or 2.5 months, working with my brothers and sisters, there's a lot of learning. Even while preparing for this simple Dhamma talk on fellowship, I learned a lot. I learned about what it really means to be a fellowship. Now, typically, most of us look at the other kind of fellowship, where we get together, we had a good chat, and then we had a good laugh. But really, in a spiritual horizontal fellowship, it is what we learn in the process. How much we develop kindness in ourselves, how much we develop compassion in ourselves, how much we learn to forgive the other person. Sometimes the other person may say certain things, and how much we learn not to quickly get angry with what the person says. That are all forms of a horizontal a spiritual friendship. Therefore, it transforms our attachment. The attachment that we have of the ego, the self, we learn to let go. The other kind of spiritual fellowship is called the vertical friendship. This is where you have a relationship between two parties at a different level. A good example will be between the teacher and the pupil, right? Whereby together, the teacher, right, with a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness, wanting to help the student, and the student having a lot of saddha, a lot of trust in the teacher, right? They build that common bond, right, and work towards nibbana. So that is the other form of friendship. So I want to point to you to a couple of suttas that I picked, right, to help reinforce this message. The famous one is from the Sigalovada Sutta, and in this sutta, the Buddha talks about the different kind of good-hearted friend. Now, in this sutta, the Buddha talks about what the paying homage to the sixth direction mean. And in this particular talk, I want to focus on the north direction, right? Because that's what it means by friendship. So, in this example, the Buddha cited several examples of what a friend means, a spiritual friend means. Someone who is helping you when you are vulnerable, right? Look after your wealth, and being a refuge to you, right, when you're afraid. You know, many times, right, in our life, how we hope we have someone that we can share our darkest secret when we have problems, right, where you need someone to just listen to you. So that is one kind of the friendship that the Buddha talks in the Sigalovada Sutta, right? And they're willing to do twice, right, of what you ask for. That's one kind of friend. The other friend who is an enduring friend, right, who really will tell you the secret, right, and will keep your secret very closely and will never abandon you. Sometimes when you do wrong, they will not jump to conclusion, but rather trying to understand you. When you're in a certain misfortune, it will take time to help you out, and to the extent of even dying for you, right? So on this point, I want to cite one very good Jataka story, and not too sure whether you heard of this Jataka story called the Great Monkey, right? In one of the past lives of the Buddha, where he was born as a great monkey, and he lived in this huge forest, right? And in this huge forest, there's this tree that is really very big, right, that almost span across the river. And there are hundreds of monkeys in that tree. And that tree is actually a mango tree. And the fruits, I mean, those of you who love to eat mango, the fruits is very juicy and it's very sweet, right? Because the tree is so secluded in the forest, you seldom have any human there, and the monkey live happily. But the Bodhisattva, being wise, realized that if ever the fruit drop into the river and it flows downstream, then it's a sign of danger. So the Bodhisattva advised all the monkeys to take precaution not to allow the fruit to drop into the river. Unfortunately, one fine day, the fruit indeed dropped into the river, right? It flows downstream into a kingdom, right? And somebody pick up that fruit and give it to the king. And the king tastes it and says, wow, this is the best fruit that I ever had. And so they embark on this journey going upward in search of this particular mango tree, right? So when they arrived at the mango tree, at that time, none of the monkeys were there, right? So the king and all his soldiers had a good time, eating the mango tree. Eventually, when that troop of monkeys returned to the tree, right, the soldiers spotted them, and the king says, get your arrows ready and shoot at the monkey, right? And the Bodhisattva, being very compassionate, right, like I said, even dying for you, right, actually try to collect all those branches, right, and form sort of a bridge so that it can cross over to the other side of the river, right? While he tried to form that bridge, the length is just short by one body length, right? So the Bodhisattva, in the form of the great monkey, right, actually filled that last part, right, of that bridge using his body. And then he asked every monkey to quickly jump across to the other bank of the river. The king, while watching this, tell his archer, stop shooting the arrow, and really admire at the monkey, right? Now, it is said that in the story, one of the monkey is actually Devadatta, right? And actually Devadatta land on the great monkey back so hard that they actually hurt the monkey, right? But the Bodhisattva actually was compassionate enough. He was sad because he pitied Devadatta, that he doesn't understand the meaning of the Dhamma. He was happy because he saved every single monkey. So that is what I meant by an enduring friend, somebody who is willing to die for you, as an example from a Jataka story. A good friend is someone who is a mentor, who can really guide you from restraining you from wrongdoings, right? Guide you to do what is good, tell you what you ought to know, and show you the path to heaven. And really a good mentor is able to advise you sometimes when you do things that is not on the right path, be able to tell you in a way that will not hurt you, yet open your eyes. So that's an example of a mentor. And a compassionate friend. A compassionate friend is one who will not rejoice in your misfortune, but will really delight in all the good fortune that you have, right? Prevent others from speaking evil about you. So though there's no backstabbing, right? And in fact, even behind your back, praise all the good qualities that you have. So that is a very compassionate friend. So these are the kind of friendship that the Buddha mentioned in the Segaladovada Sutta. So when the Buddha tells the young man, each time when you kneel down 3 times to the north, right, that is the meaning of paying respect to the north, right, on what a good friend means to you. At the same time, I picked another sutta called the Saraniya Sutta, where the Buddha talks about what are the conditions for an amiable friendship, right? One is a bodily act of goodwill, right? You know, the kind of things that you do by your bodily action, right, is one form that helps to build the friendship. The other one is words. The thing that we say to somebody, right, the kind words, the thoughtful words, the very considerate words, all this, our speech, the right speech that we learn in the Noble Eightfold Path, right, is another condition. The third one is the mind, right? You have your action, you have your words, and the third one is the mind. So when you help your good friends, what are your mental thoughts? The mental thoughts that there's no condition attached to it. It's just pure love, right? It's just sometimes to be there with a person, to be at the same energy level as the person, and the person can feel your compassion, can feel that you really understand the person, the mental state of the person helping your friend. The fourth one is the righteous gains I share. So whatever good deeds that you accumulated, you share very openly with all your good friends, the righteous gains, right? And dwells in the holy virtues. Now, there are many virtues that the Buddha taught, right? And on how we can really reflect on all these virtues, right? And really embrace this virtue together with your friends. So that's what a fellowship should embrace, right? And the last one is having a right view, right? It is important that whatever we pursue, right, we have a good view of what it means in the end, the right understanding, the right thoughts, and the right view. So with all that context of what a good friendship means, or what good friends mean, and the conditions that really make up a good friend, then we come to this concept of a Kalyana Mitra, right? And I thought there are 5 things that we need to note. So just give me a moment. Okay, in the Kalyana Mitra, and that means spiritual friendship, we know that a spiritual life is not easy. It's really not easy because sometimes in our struggle, right, we have a tendency to give up, right? And just imagine if you try to do it alone, right, you don't have the support system, you tend to give up quite easily, right? And therefore, having that spiritual friendship, right, help us, encourage us, and bond us together in this journey, right? The next one is about, in that spiritual friendship, is to build a trusted friend, right? Someone along the journey, when you encounter a problem, you have doubts, you have questions, you are unclear. You call your buddy friend and he says, what do you think about this, right? What are your thoughts behind this? And you develop that trusted relationship, right? The third one is about the ethical awareness. Many times we are blindsided, right? we have what we call the ethical blind spot, and it occurs to many of us, including myself, right? And it takes a trusted friend to tell you, Wilson, don't you know that is not right, right? And be able to know that when the person tells you that, he means good, right? Not that he wants to attack you, but he really means well. And that kind of ethical awareness is part of our Dharma cultivation. And this is what a spiritual friendship means. The fourth one in that spiritual friendship is to build a sense of gentleness and sensitivity in the way we relate to the other person, right? By words, by deeds, or by our action, right? So we know when to tell the person that he's not on the right path, when to encourage the person. Right? Sometimes we are so eager to tell somebody, see, you are not on the right path. But to find the right moment to tell him, I think that is a mark of a spiritual friendship. Right? And to eradicate all the unwholesomeness in us, right? And to be able to help the other person speak out about what troubles in that person, right? And to able to help the person to sort of confess, what he has done wrong. I think that is really a true mark of a spiritual friendship, which is not easy, right? So let me give you some very good example during the Buddhist time of friendship, right? The first one is between the Buddha and Ananda himself, right? And Ananda has served Buddha for 25 years, right? That is quite a long time. So you can just imagine in that 25 years, how much affection Ananda has of the Buddha, right? Which is why Ananda says, and I repeat, Lord, this spiritual friendship, the spiritual companionship, and the spiritual intimacy is no less than half the spiritual life, which the Buddha corrected and says, Ananda, it is not half, it is the whole of your spiritual life. So the Buddha emphasized that fellowship is indeed a very wholesome theme and is part of our spiritual life, right? And I'm glad that we are called Buddhist fellowship because that gives us an opportunity to really practice the true meaning of fellowship. Okay? Another example during the Buddha's times is between Sariputta and Moggallana, the Buddha's two chief disciples. The story goes that they made a promise to each other that whoever discovered the path to deathlessness will immediately inform the other person, right? And Sariputta received the initial teaching from one of the Buddha's disciples, and he realized that path to deathlessness, and immediately he looked for his companion, Venerable Moggallana, and Venerable Moggallana can see in Venerable Sariputta's eyes that indeed he has understood what deathlessness means. So that is a kind of a horizontal friendship or horizontal relationship, right? Where you discover something wonderful and you immediately inform your friend. Right? Another one, which I thought was very beautiful, and I think it relates very much to our today's life, is the story taught in the Chula Gosinga Sutta, where these three Arahant, Anuruddha, Nandiya, and Kimbala, you must understand, these three Arahant comes from the Aryan clan. So they are very arrogant, they are very proud, right? That is their background, right? But when they renounce the world, right, look at the simple thing that they do. What they did was, whoever returned from the village, right, with their arm, will prepare the food and prepare the seat for their fellow monk. They will get the water ready, they will get the washing pot ready. Doesn't matter, right? Whoever comes first, just get things ready for the other monk, right? And whenever the last person return, right, and have the food left over, the leftover food, the last person will clear it up, right? He will put away the seat, put away the drinking water, wash everything up, and make it clean, right? And whenever one of the monks noticed that the pot of water is empty, automatically they go and fill up, right? If they need help because it's just too heavy, with the signaling of the eye, right? They understand, or they understood each other, and they help each other, right? Without much speech. So that is a kind of fellowship, right, that is being, that the Buddha sort of illustrated to us, you know, what it means by a fellowship among monks. Yet along the way, right, they're able to practice the Dhamma. So every 5 days, they sat together and they discussed the Dhamma. So while they could do the daily chore with a lot of mindfulness, with a lot of compassion and kindness towards one another, right, yet they're able to develop that understanding with each other, helping out with each other. This is the kind of spiritual friendship that the Buddha talks about. So let me now go back to modern days. So that is during the time of the Buddha, right? So the question I ask myself is, when we get together, we listen to the Dhamma talk, we have a sutta discussion, and we attend a retreat, right? And during that moment, we are together, right? Certainly, it's one form of the highest blessing because we learn the Dhamma. That is the highest blessing. But then, do we then just go home, and the next time we chat with one another or we meet one another is 1 week later, right? So something for us to think about, all right? And do we really know each other after being in a Buddhist group for years? I posed this question because I thought it's interesting, something for us to think about. Right? The point I want to emphasize in fellowship, it is the journey that is more important, because in the journey, you truly got to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. So just a few more slides to talk about volunteers. So in some of this voluntary work, for example, in the junior Dhammadutta class, you know, the teachers and the general admin, right, they could come and clean the classroom, get the equipment ready, prepare all the Dhamma lesson, look for the Dhamma materials, think about what activities to prepare. I mean, that's really awesome, right? Where they come together as fellow teachers and helpers, right, to benefit the student. But what the teachers tell me, that the learning on their part is the learning of compassion, the learning of how to listen to the kids, the learning of how to take different viewpoints, and also practicing patience, right? So these are the Dhamma qualities, right, that through that fellowship of teachers, right, the end result is what the student benefit. But equally important is that journey in helping the student, right? Likewise with the teenagers, you know, they share the happiness at the Renchi Hospice resident and the Geylang East Home for the Aged, right? So there's a lot of fellowship that try to benefit other people, but even among themselves. Or even in the youth, where they conduct a 30 minutes meditation session and a structured Sutta Dhamma class, where they learn from each other. And then they put it to practice by visiting the Sun Love at IMH, right? So these are all wonderful examples that's happening today, right? And I think we can keep on enriching them. Then with the adult, now I got to learn, it's a super long list from the adult. Right? You have the PR volunteers, and they are an amazing group of volunteers, right? I mean, the one that helps to prepare the food for us every Sunday, to clean the kitchen, who get together whenever there's an external organization who needs our support, and we just go and help them, you know, in all the event logistics, right? Even though it's not important that we are not being mentioned up front, but what is important is to make another Buddhist organization successful. That is truly an example of a fellowship, right? There are volunteers who go to Renchi Nursing Home every Friday from 2 to 4 to help all the less fortunate. And what is very touching, it is out of their own pocket, right? So this is another form. So I'd like to take a quote from this poem, the Bodhicharyavatara, where happiness, the desire for happiness is not about your own self, right? The desire for happiness is to really help other people to be happy unconditionally. And when you take that journey, right, you'll find that the whole world around you will be a miracle, right? And some of us have experienced that. So in order to achieve that, metta must be very strong. And that metta has got to be an unconditional metta, right? You practice loving kindness and you practice karuna, the compassion, right, with no attachment or no expectation, right? And you turn selfishness into selflessness. And if we can achieve that across all our members, right, I think then we really meet our goal as a Buddhist fellowship, right? So just to wrap it up, in the Buddhist fellowship, I think to remind ourselves that journey to guide us in strengthening the fellowship is essentially the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, I will not elaborate what the Noble Eightfold Path, but just as a reminder, right, in the Sila, the Samadhi, as well as in the Panya, right? So essentially in the Sila is where the things that you do, right, the actions that you take, right, to make sure that it doesn't cause all this mental agitation, and the Samadhi and how you calm your mind, right, so that you can be very conscious about how you conduct yourself. And eventually, right, when you able to translate that and penetrate the reality and understand what it really means, right, then you attain Panya. So we're going to embark on a series of projects. There are already some existing ones that I mentioned to you. Later on, Sister Jean and Sister Jin will share with you some of our ideas. But it's not so much the project. It is about the project as example of a platform for us to practice fellowship, right? So what I did was I put a little bit twist to the Eightfold Path, right? So during the project, you're going to obviously execute the project. So we would like to see how we can develop compassion when we develop the project, right? In the way we talked, right? No carrying tales, no backbiting, no slandering, no harsh speech, right? Examples of a right speech, right? For right action, very simple. Stick to your 5 precepts, right? And for right livelihood, also very simple. Don't break your 5 precepts anywhere, anytime, right? So these are examples of how we can put the Sila part, right, when you develop compassion in your project execution. And then in the project life cycle, right, I mean throughout the entire project, right, have the mindfulness, right? Now, in terms of right effort, whenever unwholesome thought want to arise, suppress it, right? And abandon it if they arise. And try to generate more wholesome thought. And that requires a lot of effort. That's what the Buddha taught in terms of right effort, right? And in terms of mindfulness, maintain that wholesome state of awareness of basically what you're doing, right, in that point of the project. And with that right concentration, maintain the awareness from point to point to point during your project execution, right? They don't quite teach that in project management. So this is the Buddhist version of a project management. And lastly, in wisdom, when you achieve your project, right, you have wisdom in trying to what you want to achieve. That one is right thought. Your thoughts, the right thoughts, make it persist and make it sustain, right? And then you truly understand the meaning of achieving that project, right? As much as you want to show compassion and really help other people, the less fortunate one, the students, the inmates, right? Whoever sentient beings that you're trying to help, right? But in the process, if we work together as a true fellowship, right, you benefited just as much, right? So I want to conclude with this Dhammapada verse. It says, regard him as one who points out treasure. The wise one who seeking your fault rebuts you. Stay with this sort of stage. For the one who stays with a stage of this sort, things get better and not worse, right? And this is what we experience. So that concludes the essence of my talk, right? That the message simply is, fellowship is a journey, right? Take a wholesome approach to fellowship, right? Use the Noble Eightfold Path as a guide, right? While we all very focused on the outcome, but importantly in that journey of the outcome, right? Develop that spiritual fellowship that the Buddha taught us, right? So that when we achieve the outcome, at the same time, we get liberated, right? Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Now we have about 5 minutes air time for our members to commence. Anyone?
Okay.
Thank you, brother, for the wonderful thoughts. Just want to ask you, what is your view about friendship between people from different religion? Is it possible to have that kind of spiritual friendship?
Okay, very good question. I studied in St. Andrew's School, which is an Anglican school for 12 years, right? And in the Anglican school, every morning we got to say, "Our Father who art in heaven," right? But yet we have good friendship, right? If you look at the spiritual fellowship, right, it is about the kind relationship between people, right? It's about kindness, it's about truthfulness, it's about helping one another, right? So as much as we try to practice among the Buddhists, I personally don't think it's limited to just within the Buddhists, right? I think whatever faith you have, you can truly have that spiritual friendship, right? Because you help the other person, right? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the person of a different belief trusts you as someone who can alleviate his suffering, right? Whom you show understanding, whom he can share secrets, and yet you understand him and bring it out the trouble. I mean, that is what a fellowship is about, right?
Good morning, Brother Wilson. I hope this doesn't come across as too silly a question. One of the very commonsensical so-called Buddhist practices, right, when it comes to friendship, is that we need to choose our friends very wisely, and friends that try to hurt us, we try to avoid them. So just now you talked about Devadatta and the Lord Buddha, right? I'm just very intrigued because it seems that Devadatta seems to make life very difficult for the Buddha, life after life. Why does the Buddha seem to continuously hang around him? Yeah, I'm just curious about. Yeah.
My personal answer, I think, is compassion, right? Because just like the Bodhisattva at that time, who was a monkey, feels sorry for Devadatta, right, for causing such hurt, right? But because he has compassion for him, right, and because he really wants to help him, I think that makes a difference, right? And I mean, the more you try, it becomes a challenge, right? Certain situation is very easy to do, right? The harder and harder the situation is, the more difficult your own practice is, if you think about it that way, right? You know how difficult it is to love thy enemy versus to love their friend, right? And to love thy enemy requires a lot of deep compassion, to take an effort to bring that person, who caused you so much hurt, and to have that conversation with that person takes a lot of effort, right? And that is really where one of the practice of the Dhamma comes alive. Right? It's one of the practice of the paramitas. Right?
Okay, we will have last questions from the floor from this gentleman here.
Thank you. Yeah, very simple question. Earlier on in the talk, you used friendship and fellowship interchangeably. Are they the same thing, or are there some subtle difference? And the fellowship that I'm very familiar with is the fellowship of the ring, which I've seen. I've seen the trilogy many times, and they have a very unique common purpose of destroying evil. A lot of things came up there, but they stick together, stay together, and finally achieve the purpose of destroying evil. So can we learn something from there in terms of fellowship?
Yeah. So it's true that I use the word friendship and fellowship interchangeably, or to be more precise, is spiritual friendship. The way the Buddha looked at spiritual friendship is of two kinds. One is the inferior disposition, an example that I quoted earlier about some of us just love to go clubbing, some of us just love to play mahjong, some of us just like to go and have a game of sport, right? That and the Lord of the Ring is of those category, right? That's what you call the inferior disposition. The superior disposition is where you have the cultivation of the Dhamma practice, right? Where you're trying to learn how to let go, right? And how to embody the Dhamma teachings. Right?
Okay, with that, I think we want to close the service with a song Sasanaka before the announcement. Okay.